I heard banging from my root cellar at 2 a.m. When I opened the door, my entitled neighbor Karen was inside, going through my food storage, so I did something she'd never forget. I closed the door, locked it from the outside, and called the police. What happened next will shock you. Stay until the end because Karen's reaction when the cops arrived was absolutely priceless. Smash that like button and subscribe to Neighbor Wars HQ right now. Hey everyone, welcome back to Neighbor Wars HQ. If you're new here, this channel documents real neighborhood disputes entitled neighbor stories and property line battles. Today's story is absolutely insane, and it involves trespassing, breaking, and entering, and a Karen who thought she owned my property. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because we post new neighbor horror stories 3 times a week. And you won't want to miss what happens next in this ongoing saga. So let me set the scene. My name is Marcus. I'm 34 years old. I live in rural Pennsylvania on a 5-acre property that's been in my family for 3 generations. About 6 months ago, a new neighbor moved in next door. Let's call her Karen because, well, you'll see why. Karen is in her mid-50s, recently divorced, and from the moment she moved in, she made it clear she had opinions about everything. Her property is about 2 acres, nice house. But she apparently thought her property rights extended well beyond her fence line. Now, on my property, I have a root cellar. For those who don't know, a root cellar is an underground storage space, basically a small room built into the ground, perfect for storing vegetables, canned goods, and preserving food. My grandfather built it in the 1960s, and it's been a crucial part of our homesteading lifestyle. I'm talking potatoes, carrots, beets, my homemade preserves, canned tomatoes, pickles, you name it. I had probably $3,000 worth of food stored down there. The root cellar is located about 50 feet from my house, clearly on my property, marked by survey stakes, and well within my fence line. There's absolutely no question that this is my land. From day one, Karen had issues. First, it was my chickens. She complained they were too loud. Mind you, I have hens, no roosters, so we're talking minimal noise. Then she complained about my compost pile, saying it smelled, even though it's 200 feet from her property line and properly maintained. Then she started making comments about my old-fashioned root cellar, saying it was an eyesore and that I should modernize and just use a refrigerator like normal people. Things escalated about 3 months ago. Karen started walking her dog on my property, not just along the edge, but straight across my land, past my garden, past the root cellar. I politely asked her to stay on her own property. She laughed and said, "It's just a dog walk, don't be so uptight." I installed no trespassing signs. She ignored them, and I caught her taking vegetables from my garden. When I confronted her, she said, "You have so much, you won't miss a few tomatoes." I told her that was theft. She rolled her eyes and walked away. I should mention, I work from home as a software developer, so I'm around a lot, but I do have to go into the office occasionally for meetings. That's when things got really weird. I started noticing my root cellar door would be slightly ajar when I came home, even though I always close it securely. Items would be moved around. At first, I thought maybe I was being paranoid or forgetful, but then jars started going missing. A whole shelf of my canned peaches disappeared, then my pickled vegetables, then bags of potatoes. I set up a basic security camera aimed at the root cellar entrance, and sure enough, within 2 days, I had her on video. Karen, walking onto my property, looking around to make sure no one was watching, and then opening my root cellar door and going inside. She spent 15 minutes in there, came out with a canvas bag full of my preserved food, and walked back to her house like she owned the place. I was furious. I saved the footage and confronted her the next day. I showed her the video on my phone. You know what she said? "You're being ridiculous. You have way more than you need, and I'm on a fixed income. You should be happy to share with your neighbors. That's what community means." I told her that theft is theft, regardless of her financial situation, and that if it happened again, I'd call the police. She scoffed and said, "Go ahead. They won't do anything over a few vegetables." That brings us to 3 nights ago. It was around 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night. I'm a light sleeper, and I heard something, a metallic creaking sound. It was faint, but distinct. I got out of bed, looked out my window, and saw a flashlight beam moving near my root cellar. My heart started pounding. I grabbed my phone, pulled on some shoes and a jacket, and quietly went outside. I could hear someone moving around inside the root cellar. The door was wide open, and I could see the flashlight moving around inside. I crept closer, staying quiet, and peeked around the edge of the doorway. And there she was, Karen, at 2 a.m., in my root cellar, going through my food storage. She had already loaded up a large box with jars of my canned goods, bags of dried beans, and containers of my preserved fruits. I pulled out my phone and started recording video. I wanted evidence. Clear, undeniable evidence. I recorded for about 30 seconds, getting clear footage of her face, her taking my property, everything. Then I made a decision that some people might think was extreme, but in the moment, it felt absolutely justified. I stepped back, grabbed the heavy wooden door of the root cellar and pulled it shut. There's a metal latch on the outside and I slid it closed. The root cellar door is thick, heavy wood, built to keep the temperature stable. It's not airtight. There are ventilation gaps. But once that door is closed and latched from the outside, you're not getting out without someone opening it from outside. I immediately heard Karen yell, "Hey, what the who's out there?" Called out, "This is my property, Karen. You're trespassing and stealing. I'm calling the police." She started banging on the door. "Let me out. You can't do this. This is kidnapping. This is illegal. I'll sue you." I sat down on a lawn chair about 10 feet from the door and dialed 911. I calmly explained the situation to the dispatcher. I told them I had caught a neighbor breaking into my root cellar, stealing my property, and that I had secured her inside the structure on my property while waiting for police to arrive. The dispatcher asked if anyone was in danger. I said no. The person was safe, but contained, and that I had video evidence of the break-in and theft. The dispatcher said officers were on their way and to stay on the line. The estimated arrival time was about 15 minutes since we're in a rural area. Karen was losing IT inside that root cellar. She was screaming, banging on the door, threatening to sue me, calling me every name in the book. She yelled that she couldn't breathe, total lie. There's plenty of ventilation. She said she had a medical condition, no mention of that in the months I'd known her. She tried everything to manipulate me into opening that door. I just sat there, phone in hand, talking calmly to the 911 dispatcher, while Karen's muffled screams echoed from the underground cellar. After about 18 minutes, I saw the flashing lights coming up my driveway. 2 police cruisers, 3 officers. I stood up, kept my hands visible, and walked toward them calmly. The officers approached, and I could still hear Karen screaming from inside the root cellar. One officer asked, "Is that her in there?" I nodded. "Yes, officer. She broke into my root cellar around 2 a.m. I have her on video. This isn't the first time she's stolen from me. I secured her inside and called you immediately." The lead officer, an older guy who introduced himself as Sergeant Peters, asked me to show him the video. I pulled up both the footage from earlier incidents and the video I'd just taken tonight. Clear as day, Karen entering my property, opening my root cellar, and stealing my food stores. Sergeant Peters nodded slowly. "Okay, we're going to need to get her out and get her statement. Can you open the door?" I walked over and unlatched the door. Karen practically exploded out of there. Her hair was messed up. She had dirt on her clothes. And she was absolutely raging. "Officer, arrest this man. He kidnapped me. He locked me in that death trap. Couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die. He's insane." Sergeant Peters held up his hand. "Ma'am, calm down. What were you doing in this structure at 2 a.m.? Karen's face went through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. He has all this food and he won't share? I'm on a fixed income. I needed, so you were taking items without permission," the officer interrupted. "It's not stealing. He has too much. It's wasteful. Someone should use it," second officer started. Looking at the contents of the box Karen had packed, dozens of jars of preserved food, bags of vegetables, all clearly from inside my root cellar, Sergeant Peters looked at me. "Is this your property, and are these your items?" "Yes, sir." All of it. She's been stealing from me for months. I have video evidence going back weeks. Confronted her before, warned her I'd call the police if it continued. The officer turned back to Karen. Ma'am, you're on someone else's property, taking items without permission. That's trespassing and theft. I'm going to need you to put your hands behind your back. Karen's eyes went wide. You're arresting me. What about him? He imprisoned. Me, the third officer, a younger woman, spoke up. Ma'am, the property owner found you committing a crime on his property and detained you while waiting for law enforcement. It's legally within his rights in this state. You, however, committed breaking and entering, trespassing, and theft. They handcuffed Karen. She was crying now, a complete 180 from her rage moments before. This is ridiculous. Over some vegetables? You're ruining my life over vegetables? Sergeant Peters shook his head. According to these videos, you've stolen hundreds of dollars worth of preserved food over several months. This isn't about vegetables. This is about repeated theft and property crimes. They walked her to the police car. As they put her in the back seat, she was sobbing and yelling about how unfair it all was, how I was a terrible neighbor, how she was going to sue everyone. After she was secured in the vehicle, Sergeant Peters came back to talk to me. Need you to come down to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement and provide copies of all your video evidence. We'll also need an itemized list of everything that was stolen, with estimated values if possible. I nodded. Absolutely, officer. I have detailed records of everything I preserved this year. I can provide receipts for the jars, ingredients. Everything. He handed me his card. Given the video evidence and the fact that we caught her in the act, this is pretty open and shut. She'll likely be charged with multiple counts of theft, trespassing, and possibly breaking and entering, depending on how the DA wants to proceed. You did the right thing calling us. After they left, I stood there in my driveway at almost 3 a.m., adrenaline still pumping, trying to process what had just happened. I went back to the root cellar, looked at all my preserved food, and just shook my head. All of this over someone who felt entitled to take what wasn't theirs. The next day, I went to the police station as requested, provided all my video evidence. A detailed inventory of stolen items which totaled over $2,400 worth of food and supplies, and gave my full statement. The detective handling the case told me they had more than enough evidence to prosecute. Karen was charged with multiple counts of theft, criminal trespassing, multiple counts breaking and entering attempted burglary. Her bail was set at $5,000. From what I heard through the grapevine, she couldn't afford it immediately and spent 2 days in jail before a family member bailed her out. About a week later, I got a letter from her lawyer threatening to sue me for false imprisonment and emotional distress. I forwarded it to my own attorney, who laughed and said she has no case. You are protecting your property and detained someone committing a crime until law enforcement arrived. This is a scare tactic. Sure enough, I never heard anything more about that lawsuit. My attorney sent a response letter explaining the legal basis for citizens' detention during the commission of a crime, and that was the end of it.
Oh.
The preliminary hearing was last week. Karen showed up with her lawyer and tried to argue that she was confused about property lines and thought the root cellar was a community storage area. The prosecutor literally showed the judge a satellite map of the properties with clear boundary lines and then played my security camera footage. The judge looked exhausted and bound her over for trial. Her lawyer approached me outside the courthouse and asked if I'd be willing to drop the charges in exchange for restitution. I said I'd consider it if she paid full restitution for all stolen items, $2,400. Paid for the installation of a proper security system for my root cellar, $800. Agreed to a restraining order keeping her off my property. Performed 100 hours of community service, issued a written apology. Her lawyer said he'd discuss it with his client. I'm waiting to hear back. In the meantime, Karen has apparently put her house up for sale. I've heard from other neighbors that she's been telling everyone who'll listen that I'm the problem, that I'm a terrible neighbor, that I overreacted to her borrowing a few things. Most of our neighbors know the truth, though. Several have come forward to say she'd been inappropriate with them, too. Asking to borrow tools that never came back, letting her dog poop in their yards, generally being entitled. So what's The lesson here: document everything. I cannot stress this enough. If I hadn't installed that camera, if I hadn't kept records, if I hadn't saved all that video evidence, this could have turned into a he said, she said situation. But because I had clear, undeniable proof, the law was on my side. Also, set boundaries early and enforce them. I tried to be nice. I tried to be understanding. Some people see kindness as weakness and will take advantage until you stop them. And finally, know your rights. Know your property lines. Know what you're legally allowed to do when someone is committing a crime on your property. I consulted with a lawyer early on about my options, so when this situation happened, I knew I was within my legal rights. All right, Neighbor Wars HQ family. That's the story of how I caught Karen breaking into my root cellar and locked her inside until the cops arrived. This situation is still ongoing, so if you want updates, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. I'll post a follow-up video once the trial is complete, or if we reach a settlement. What do you think? Did I do the right thing? Would you have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've had experiences with entitled neighbors, share your stories. We might feature them in a future video. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to Neighbor Wars HQ, and hit the notification bell. We post new neighbor dispute stories every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Thanks for watching, and remember, good fences make good neighbors, but good cameras make great evidence. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there.